The arrogance of the Galactic Coalition. The Galactic Coalition had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their fleet stretched across entire star systems, and their armies were armed with the most advanced technology in the known galaxy. To them, Earth was nothing more than a primitive backwater, a planet teeming with untamed wilderness and an unsophisticated species that barely qualified as a spacefaring civilization. When the time came to absorb Earth into their dominion, the Coalition war strategists studied the planet and concluded that its geography posed no real threat. Its cities were defendable but ultimately vulnerable to orbital bombardment, its oceans vast but unimportant to planetary control. The forests and jungles were dismissed entirely. Useless terrain, scoffed General Vrix of the Zluri Dominion, a reptilian species known for its methodical approach to war. The humans barely inhabit their jungles. No infrastructure, no industry. It is a non-factor. Their weapons are primitive, added Commander Jorak, a towering, armored brute from the warlike Gazon race. Lasers and plasma will reduce them to nothing. This will be a straightforward occupation. With that, the invasion began. Landing in the Green Hell, the first wave of troops landed in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, chosen as a staging ground for the planetary takeover. From orbit, it appeared to be an endless sea of green, its thick vegetation stretching as far as the eye could see. It was the perfect place to establish bases away from major human cities before launching full-scale planetary control operations. But from the moment their landing craft touched down, things began to go wrong. The jungle's heat was suffocating, the humidity unbearable for species accustomed to climate-controlled warships. Their advanced visors fogged up, their metal armor became slick with sweat, and even their weapons malfunctioned from the relentless moisture. More troubling than the weather, however, was the eerie silence. They expected to hear the sounds of alien wildlife, chittering, growling, howling, but the jungle was disturbingly quiet. Then, the first scouting team disappeared. A 10-man squad, armed with plasma rifles and motion trackers, had ventured into the dense foliage to survey the area. They never reported back. Drones sent to locate them showed nothing but trees, vines, and still water. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just gone. Commander Jorak growled in frustration. Useless fools. The jungle must have swallowed them. Send another squad. Another squad ventured out. Then another. Each one vanished, leaving no trace. The first attack. The Coalition's leaders dismissed these disappearances as accidents. Perhaps the humans' primitive wildlife had claimed a few unlucky soldiers. But the truth became clear soon enough. The first real attack happened at night. A battalion of Zalari troops had set up a temporary base on a cleared patch of land, deploying energy shields around their perimeter. They felt safe inside their technology. They weren't. The jungle came alive. First, the lights went out. A surge of electromagnetic interference knocked out their scanners and sensors. In the darkness, something moved. Gunfire erupted, but the enemy remained unseen. Figures darted between the trees, too fast for the sluggish, armor-clad Zalari to track. A strangled scream tore through the night. Then another. One by one, soldiers were pulled into the foliage, vanishing just like the scouting teams before them. Those who tried to flee tripped into pits lined with sharpened stakes. Others stumbled over thin wires that sent them crashing into concealed traps, their armor punctured by crude but effective spikes. By dawn, half the battalion was dead. The survivors huddled together, their once pristine uniforms stained with mud, blood, and sweat. Fear was evident in their alien eyes. The humans had sent them a message. The jungle belongs to us. The hunters become the hunted. The Coalition, now realizing they were dealing with an enemy more formidable than anticipated, ordered reinforcements. More soldiers landed. More technology was deployed. But none of it changed the fundamental reality. The jungle itself had become the humans' greatest weapon. The so-called primitive species had transformed the Amazon into a living battlefield, where every tree, every shadow, every patch of ground could mean death. And as the sun rose over the blood-soaked foliage, an unseen sniper adjusted his rifle scope from the treetops, exhaling slowly. His camouflage made him one with the jungle. His breath steady, his shot inevitable. Welcome to Earth, aliens, into the kill zone. The Galactic Coalition had underestimated Earth, and now their forces were paying the price. The jungle wasn't just an obstacle, it was a living, breathing nightmare. The survivors of the first attack had barely managed to regroup before reinforcements arrived. This time, the Coalition deployed their elite forces, hardened veterans from multiple star systems, equipped with advanced tracking drones and mechanized war machines. They believed sheer technological superiority would turn the tide. They were wrong. The ghosts of the jungle. Lieutenant Jorax, a battle-hardened officer of the Gazon Legion, took charge of the second wave. He was taller than any human, his forearms carrying an array of plasma rifles and blade weapons. His squad, numbering 50 strong, advanced cautiously into the rainforest. They moved in tight formations, their weapons scanning every inch of the terrain. Their infrared sensors searched for human heat signatures, their motion detectors scanned the undergrowth, and their drones hovered above, mapping the dense canopy. Nothing. No human presence. No signs of movement. Just the endless, suffocating jungle. Then the first soldier fell. One moment, he was walking at the rear of the squad, plasma rifle raised. The next, he was yanked into the shadows, vanishing as if the jungle itself had swallowed him. His strangled cry was barely audible before silence returned. Jorax whirled around, barking orders. Defensive positions. Scan the trees. A dozen weapons turned to the canopy, but there was nothing. No movement, no target, just the endless, twisting foliage. Then another soldier screamed. A single bullet, fired from somewhere unseen, punched through his helmet and out the back of his skull. He collapsed before his comrades could react. The jungle came alive. From all directions, the Coalition forces found themselves under attack. Silent figures moved between the trees, camouflaged so perfectly that even their high-tech scanners couldn't detect them. Bullets whistled through the air, finding weak points in alien armor. Coalition soldiers fell, one by one, taken down by an enemy they couldn't see. Panic set in. Switched to thermal vision. Jorax bellowed. The soldiers activated their visors, but the heat signatures they expected to see weren't there. Instead, the jungle burned with false readings. Heat traps set by the humans to confuse them. A grenade detonated nearby, sending 2 Zalari troops sprawling. The explosion wasn't from plasma. It was from crude human explosives, packed with shrapnel and jungle debris. Jorax cursed. The humans weren't just attacking. They were hunting. Technology fails. Instinct prevails. For all their technological superiority, the galactic troops were ill-prepared for jungle warfare. Their heavy armor, designed for urban battles and planetary invasions, slowed them down. Their energy weapons, powerful but reliant on precise targeting systems, struggled against unseen foes. Meanwhile, the human special forces moved like ghosts. They blended seamlessly with the foliage, using centuries-old guerrilla warfare tactics that no coalition strategist had accounted for. They set up tripwires, hidden spike traps, and pits filled with sharpened bamboo stakes. They didn't rely on electronic communication, only hand signals and silent movements. Jorax realized the truth too late. The humans didn't just live in the jungle. They owned it. The desperate retreat. The ambush continued for hours. One by one, the coalition soldiers fell. Some were shot from unseen angles, their bodies toppling into the mud. Others were lured into booby-trap clearings, where hidden explosives turned the dense undergrowth into a lethal kill zone. Jorax himself barely avoided death. A sniper's bullet grazed his shoulder, burning a searing hole through his armor. If he had moved an inch to the left, the shot would have gone through his skull. Desperation took over. "We need air support." Jorax roared into his comms. The order was given. Coalition dropships descended from orbit, their massive engines roaring as they unleashed barrages of plasma fire onto the jungle below. Trees ignited, entire sections of the forest burned. But the humans had already vanished. They had anticipated the response. Long before the airstrike began, they had disappeared into underground tunnels, hidden passages carved into the earth. When the smoke cleared, the jungle remained, blackened in some places, but still standing. The coalition forces had destroyed nothing of value, and as Jorax and his remaining troops limped back to their base, the snipers resumed their fire, picking them off, one by one, until the survivors barely numbered a dozen. The message is clear. Jorax collapsed into the command center, blood oozing from a wound in his leg. He locked eyes with General Vrix, who had been monitoring the battle from orbit. "This is impossible," the general muttered, his confidence shattered. "How can a primitive species—" "They are not primitive," Jorax spat, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "They are predators. We are the prey." Silence hung in the room. The Galactic Coalition had invaded Earth expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had walked into the deadliest battlefield in the known galaxy. And the worst part? The humans were just getting started. No way out. The Galactic Coalition's forces were in disarray. What was supposed to be a routine planetary suppression had turned into a waking nightmare. The humans weren't just resisting. They were hunting. Lieutenant Jorax and the surviving remnants of his squad stumbled through the dense jungle, their armor scratched and dented, their confidence shattered. Every step felt like a mistake. Every movement could trigger another human ambush. They needed to get out, but the jungle wasn't letting them go. The jungle closes in. Jorax checked his motion scanner for the 10th time in as many minutes. It was useless. The humans had jammed their tech with crude but effective interference. Simple heat traps, water vapor dispersions, and natural magnetic anomalies caused by the dense minerals in the soil. They were blind. He turned to the last 7 members of his once proud squad. They looked shaken, their armor stained with mud and blood. "We're pulling back," he growled, his voice low. "No more direct engagements. We regroup at the exfil zone and get off this cursed rock." Sergeant Valcor, a towering reptilian warrior, exhaled through his gills. "And what if they follow?" "They're already following," Jorax muttered. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. The squad froze. Then came the whisper of something slicing through the air. A low thwip sound. One of the troopers, a Zelari scout, jerked suddenly. His mandibles twitched, and he fell forward, unmoving. A thin, metal spike was lodged in his throat. "No plasma signature," Valcor whispered, horrified. "No energy readings. They're using solid projectiles. Primitive weapons. No electronic components. No heat trace. Their armor was designed to withstand directed energy weapons, not kinetic penetration." The jungle had swallowed another soldier whole. Jorax clenched his jaw. He activated his communicator. "Command, this is Jorax. We're compromised. Request emergency extraction." Static. The signal was jammed. The humans had cut them off completely. No reinforcements. No rescue. They were on their own. The gauntlet. A cold realization settled over the squad. They weren't just trying to escape. They were being herded. The humans had left openings in their defenses, deliberately pushing the squad into a predetermined path. They weren't killing them all at once. They were breaking them, piece by piece. And then, as if to prove the point, a new sound echoed through the trees. A deep, rhythmic thumping. Something was moving. Something big. Jorax turned, his secondary arms gripping his plasma rifle. His squad aimed their weapons at the tree line. The ground trembled. Trees shook. Leaves rained down from above. Then, out of the shadows, came a towering machine. The titan of the jungle. At first glance, it looked like a 4-legged beast, nearly 20 feet tall. Its body was covered in thick plating, painted in a camouflage pattern that matched the jungle around it. It moved with an eerie smoothness, its metal joints barely making a sound. But this was no creature. It was human technology. A heavily armored walker, a war machine designed for jungle combat. Mounted on its shoulders were 2 rotary cannons, their barrels spinning slowly. On its front plating, a crude insignia was painted, a jaguar's head, its fangs bared in a snarl. Jorax felt his throat tighten. "They have mechs." The answer came when the machine opened fire. Bullets rained down in a merciless hailstorm. The jungle floor erupted as rounds tore through trees, roots, and flesh alike. One of Jorax's soldiers was torn apart instantly, his body reduced to nothing more than shredded armor and exposed bone. "Scatter!" Jorax roared. They dove for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. The mech's targeting systems were too precise, its firepower too overwhelming. The squad broke into a desperate sprint, dodging through the foliage as rounds chewed through the jungle behind them. Valcor was hit in the leg. He collapsed, dragging himself behind a fallen log. Jorax, help me. Jorax hesitated. He wanted to go back, but the mecha's cannons were still spinning. If he moved an inch into the open, he'd be next. Valcor's eyes widened as the machine's spotlight focused on him. Then the cannons roared. Jorax turned away. Another soldier, another friend, gone. The only way out is through. The survivors ran. They didn't stop, didn't think, just ran. The mech continued its pursuit, but the humans had calculated everything. The squad was being forced toward a ravine, a sheer drop covered in mist and vines. Jorax skidded to a halt just inches from the edge. Below, he saw nothing but darkness. A trap. The humans had forced them here on purpose. The mech slowed its advance. It didn't need to rush. They were already beaten. Jorax turned to the last two soldiers at his side. They were panting, their weapons trembling in their hands. There was no way out. Unless... Jorax looked up at the trees. If they couldn't go forward, and they couldn't go back, they'd go up. He gritted his teeth. Climb. The soldiers hesitated only a second before they obeyed. Using their secondary arms, they grabbed onto the thick vines and hauled themselves up into the trees. Jorax followed, his claws digging into the bark. The mecha's cannons roared again, tearing into the ravine's edge. But it was too late. They were gone. The hunter becomes the hunted. High above, hidden among the thick branches, Jorax took a deep breath. The mech stomped below, scanning for them, but it wouldn't find them. For the first time since entering the jungle, Jorax understood. The humans had never seen this as a war. It was a hunt. And now, Jorax wasn't the predator. He was the prey. The jungle always wins. Jorax clung to the thick branch, his three-fingered claws digging into the damp bark. The dense jungle canopy above him filtered what little light remained, casting eerie green shadows below. His remaining soldiers, just two now, crouched beside him, their breathing ragged. Below, the mech still stalked the ground, its massive cannons sweeping back and forth, searching for them. Its targeting sensors whirred softly as it analyzed the area, but Jorax knew its weakness now. The humans hadn't just built this jungle warfare machine. They had designed it for their kind of war. It was powerful on the ground, nearly invincible. But up here, in the trees, it was blind. The jungle was on his side now. Survivors or prey. The soldier to his left, a smaller vaccine named Velraz, trembled as he whispered, "What now, Commander?" Jorax didn't answer immediately. He was still thinking. In normal circumstances, he'd order an orbital bombardment. Just level the jungle and wipe the humans out. But their fleet was gone. Destroyed. They were stranded on this planet, reduced from warriors to May prey. "We move," Jorax finally whispered. Silent. Slow. The three survivors climbed carefully from branch to branch. Their armor was heavy, but their species had evolved in dense forests before developing technology. They still had some of that ancient skill. Jorax kept his eyes locked on the mech as it stomped in frustration below. It couldn't see them, but the humans could. They always could. The shadow in the leaves. A faint noise, a whisper of movement. Jorax froze, signaling for his men to stop. A second later, something landed on the branch just a few feet away. A human. The figure barely made a sound, its body covered in dark jungle camouflage. Green and black paint covered its exposed skin, making it almost invisible in the dim light. The rifle in its hands was sleek, long-barreled, fitted with strange attachments. A sniper's weapon. Jorax's breath caught in his throat. The human had been waiting for them. The sniper tilted its head slightly, looking right at Jorax. He couldn't see the human's face beneath the camouflage and the visor, but he could feel the quiet confidence radiating from it. Then the human raised one finger. A silent gesture. Jorax didn't move. He knew what it meant. Don't. But Velraz panicked. The Avaxi trooper reached for his plasma rifle. It was a twitch, a moment of fear-fueled reflex. The sniper fired. A single thwip sound. Velraz jerked as the bullet punched into his skull. His body went limp, sliding off the branch, crashing down through the undergrowth. The mech's head snapped toward the noise, its cannons roaring. The jungle floor erupted in fire and shrapnel as it shredded Velraz's corpse. Jorax and his last soldier stayed frozen in place. The sniper still hadn't moved. The human could have shot them both, could have killed them in an instant. Instead, the sniper leaned in slightly, whispering just one sentence. Run. Escape or execution. The sniper disappeared into the trees, vanishing as if it had never been there. Jorax barely had time to process what had happened before the jungle exploded with motion. Gunfire erupted from all around. From above. From the bushes. From nowhere. The humans had never been hunting alone. Jorax and his last soldier, Gran, a massive, four-armed bruiser, moved instinctively. They ran. It was pure chaos. Explosions lit up the night as more human guerrilla fighters emerged from their hiding spots, unleashing hell on the mech. The massive war machine twisted, trying to return fire, but the humans were everywhere. Their bullets slammed into weak points, detonating exposed fuel canisters, shattering sensors. The unstoppable Galactic Coalition mech fell to its knees, burning in the darkness. And Jorax? He was running for his life. The river of no return. Branches whipped at Jorax's face as he tore through the underbrush. He could hear Gran behind him, panting, trying to keep up. Then the ground vanished beneath them. Jorax barely managed to stop himself in time. Before them was a raging river, its waters surging violently over sharp, jagged rocks. A dead end. Gran cursed, spinning around. They are coming. Jorax turned. Shadows moved in the jungle. More humans. Not running. Not panicking. Just stalking them. One by one, red dots appeared on their armor. Snipers. Trapped. Gran roared and raised his weapon. But Jorax knew it was pointless. The jungle had already won. A different kind of mercy. Then, something unexpected happened. A human stepped out of the trees. Not a sniper. Not a soldier. A commander. The human wore jungle-patterned fatigues, a sidearm on his hip, his rifle slung lazily over his shoulder. He looked calm, almost bored. He regarded Jorax and Gran with an unreadable expression before speaking in Galactic Common. You lost. Jorax stayed silent. The human tilted his head. You're not stupid. You know what happens next. Gran growled. Just get it over with, hairless. But the human didn't pull the trigger. Instead, he pulled out a small device and tossed it toward them. It landed at Jorax's feet. A distress beacon. The human smirked. Call your fleet. Tell them you surrender. Jorax stared at it, then at the jungle around him. The death trap that had consumed his entire squad. This wasn't just a war zone. It was a human hunting ground, and they had never stood a chance. Slowly, Jorax reached down and activated the beacon. Above, the stars twinkled, waiting for the Galactic Coalition's response. But deep in his heart, Jorax knew the truth. This war was already over, because the jungle didn't belong to them. It belonged to the humans.